I've always loved long drives. There's something about the open road, the hum of the engine, and the occasional gas station stops that make me feel free. But after what happened to me last fall, I don't think I'll ever drive alone at night again. It was around 2:30 a.m., somewhere in the middle of Arizona, miles away from any town. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides, the road ahead illuminated only by my headlights. I had been driving for hours, trying to make it to California by morning, when I saw someone standing on the side of the road. A hitchhiker. At first I wasn't going to stop. Who in their right mind hitchhikes in the middle of nowhere at this hour? But something about him caught my eye. He was wearing a faded denim jacket, jeans, and old boots. His long dark hair was tangled by the wind, and his face looked off. I can't explain it. He wasn't scary exactly, but there was something unsettling about how still he stood, how his head tilted slightly, like he was listening for something. Before I could talk myself out of it, I slowed down and rolled my window down. "Where are you headed?" I asked. The man turned his head slowly, his deep-set eyes locking onto mine. "West," he said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through the night air like a blade. I hesitated for a moment, then sighed. I figured he was just some drifter. Maybe someone who had been stranded for hours. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. "Hop in," I said. He slid into the passenger seat without a word, closing the door gently. As I started driving again, I stole a glance at him. He was staring straight ahead, hands resting on his lap, motionless. "You been out here long?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, in that same hushed tone, he murmured, "A while." Something about his voice sent a chill down my spine. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the tires rolling over the cracked asphalt. I tried making small talk, but he barely responded. The air inside the car felt heavy, like the temperature had dropped. Then he finally spoke. "You should slow down up ahead." I glanced at him, confused. "What?" "There's a sharp turn. Dangerous at night." I frowned. My GPS didn't mention any sharp turns, but something in his voice made me listen. I eased off the gas, peering ahead. Sure enough, just beyond the next hill, the road curved sharply to the right, far more than I would have expected. Had I been going faster, I might have skidded right off the road. I swallowed hard. "Thanks," I muttered. The hitchhiker didn't respond. I glanced at him again. The seat was empty. I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammering. My hands shook as I turned, expecting him to be crouching in the footwell, maybe having fallen over. But no. The door was still shut. The seatbelt was still fastened. He was just gone. A cold sweat dripped down my back as I stared at the empty seat, trying to process what just happened. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something. On the passenger seat where he had been sitting lay an old faded newspaper. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The headline read, "Local man dies in tragic car accident. Sharp turn on highway, claims another life." Below it was a photo, the man in the denim jacket, the same one who had just been sitting in my car. I dropped the newspaper like it burned me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I threw the car into gear and sped away, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't stop driving until the sun began to rise. To this day, I don't know if I imagined it all or if I picked up something else that night. But one thing I know for sure, I'll never pick up another hitchhiker again. Driving cross country at night has its perks: empty highways, no traffic, and an eerie kind of solitude that makes you feel like the world belongs only to you. But that silence, that emptiness, it can also play tricks on your mind. At least, that's what I told myself when I stopped at a gas station that, according to all logic, shouldn't have existed. It was past midnight, and I was somewhere in the Midwest, hours from the nearest major city. My gas gauge had dipped dangerously close to empty, and my GPS was completely useless. No signal, no service. I was starting to panic when out of nowhere, I saw the glow of neon lights in the distance. A gas station. Relieved, I pulled into the lot, the old tires of my car crunching over gravel. The station looked outdated. No brand logos, just a plain white sign that flickered weakly. GAS. There was a small convenience store attached, but the windows were too dark to see inside. The pumps were ancient, the kind with the rolling numbers instead of digital screens. I half expected to see an attendant step out in a uniform straight from the 1950s. I shut off my engine and got out, the night air thick and still. The place felt wrong somehow, but I pushed the thought aside. I needed gas, nothing else. As I unscrewed the cap and lifted the nozzle, I heard a bell jingle behind me, the sound of a door opening. I turned toward the store. A man stood in the doorway, half in shadow. "Evening," he said, his voice flat and expressionless. I nodded. "Hey, do I need to pay inside first?" The man didn't answer right away. He just stood there watching me. Then finally he said, "Go ahead and fill up. You can pay after." Something about his tone made me uneasy, but I nodded and turned back to the pump. The gas flowed slower than usual, as if the machine itself was reluctant. Every few seconds, I glanced back at the man. He hadn't moved. He was still standing in the doorway staring at me. I was about halfway through filling my tank when I noticed something else. The air smelled off, not like gasoline, not even like the usual dusty scent of old highways. It smelled like something rotting. That's when I saw it. The pumps. The metal looked rusted, corroded in places. The numbers on the dial weren't rolling properly, glitching and skipping randomly. And the most unsettling thing, there was no hose connected to the nozzle. I'd been standing there for 5 minutes, pretending to pump gas from a machine that wasn't even attached to anything. My breath hitched, my stomach twisting into knots. Slowly, I turned back to the man in the doorway. He was smiling now, wide, too wide. "You're almost done," he said, his voice distorted, as if two people were speaking at once. A wave of pure panic shot through me. I dropped the nozzle and sprinted for my car. My fingers fumbled with the handle as I yanked the door open and threw myself inside. My keys were still in the ignition. I twisted them hard, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The car wouldn't start. I turned the key again. Click, click, nothing. I looked up, my breath shallow. The man was no longer in the doorway. He was standing right beside my car. His face was inches from my window, his eyes dark pits. His grin stretched impossibly far, his teeth too sharp, too perfect. I slammed my fist against the dashboard in frustration, my voice cracking as I muttered, "Come on, come on." Then, just as suddenly as it had died, the engine roared to life. I floored the gas pedal, tires screeching against the gravel. The man didn't move. He just stood there, watching as I sped away, his smile never fading. I drove like a madman, refusing to look in my rearview mirror. I didn't stop until I saw a real gas station, brightly lit, full of people. I pulled in, my hands still shaking as I got out. But when I looked at my gas gauge, my stomach dropped. It was still empty. There was no way I could have made it this far on nothing, but I had. And when I turned around, expecting to see the road I had come from, there was nothing there. No sign of the gas station, no lights, just an empty stretch of highway. Like the place had never existed. But I know it did. Because to this day, my car still carries the faintest scent of something rotting. Road trips were supposed to be freeing. Just me, my car, and the endless stretch of highway. But after hours of driving through winding back roads with nothing but darkness and the low hum of my radio, exhaustion hit me like a brick. My eyelids felt heavier with each mile, and I knew I had to stop before I dozed off at the wheel. That's when I saw it. A motel, sitting just off the road. I didn't remember passing a town sign, and my GPS still had no service. But there it was. An old single-story building with a flickering neon sign that read motel. No name, no branding, just motel. I should have kept driving, but I didn't. I pulled into the gravel lot and stepped out, stretching my stiff limbs. The air was strangely still. No wind, no crickets, nothing. The place looked old but not abandoned. Faint yellow light glowed from a few windows, and a dusty vending machine stood outside the office door. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit. A small bell-covered door led to the front desk, where a man sat behind the counter, staring at something unseen. His skin looked waxy, like he hadn't moved in hours. "Need a room?" His voice was dry, hollow. "Yeah," I said, trying not to sound as unsettled as I felt. "Just for the night." He slid a key across the counter. "Room 06. No paperwork, no ID check, nothing. Just a key." I took it and turned toward the hall. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach turn. There was no computer, no cash register. Just a dusty old telephone. I shook off the unease and found my room at the end of the hall. The key slid into the lock smoothly, and with a soft click, the door creaked open. The inside was exactly what you'd expect. Old floral wallpaper peeling at the edges, a faded carpet, and a small boxy TV sitting on a wooden dresser. The bed looked clean enough, and at that point, I was too exhausted to care about anything else. I locked the door, tossed my bag onto a chair, and collapsed onto the mattress, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the overhead light buzzed faintly, and for the first time that night, I let my eyes drift shut. Then I heard it. A whisper. My eyes shot open. The room was empty. The door was still locked. The air felt thick, heavy, like something unseen was watching me. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. Then, from under the bed, I heard breathing. Shallow, ragged, too fast to be my own. Every muscle in my body locked up. My first instinct was to bolt for the door, but something deep inside told me not to move. My gaze shifted toward the dresser mirror, and that's when I saw it. A figure crawling out from under the bed. Its limbs were long, unnaturally thin, its fingers dragging against the carpet. It moved in jerky, unnatural motions, its head tilting at an impossible angle. And the worst part? It had no face. Just smooth, featureless skin where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should have been. The air around me grew freezing. The buzzing light flickered violently. And as the thing pulled itself fully out from under the bed, it stopped. Then it turned its head toward me. I couldn't breathe. My body refused to move. The whispering returned, louder now, coming from all around me. The figure's head tilted further, as if studying me. Then, in a single impossible motion, it lunged. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember grabbing my bag or yanking open the door. The next thing I knew, I was outside, sprinting toward my car. I fumbled with the keys, threw myself inside, and peeled out of the lot without looking back. As I sped down the road, my pulse hammering, I dared one glance in the rearview mirror. The motel wasn't there, just an empty stretch of road and a flickering neon sign lying in the dirt. I never found that motel again. It wasn't on any map, and when I asked locals about it later, no one had ever heard of it. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear that whispering, and I know it remembers me. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes with driving down an empty highway in the dead of night. Just you, your headlights cutting through the darkness, and the endless road stretching ahead. After what had happened at the motel, I should have stopped for the night in a real town, somewhere crowded, somewhere safe. But my nerves were still shot, and I just wanted to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. The road was a straight shot through the desert, barely any signs, no streetlights. The only sound was the low hum of my tires against the pavement. My fuel gauge was holding steady. My phone battery was low, but I still had some music playing to keep me grounded. Then I saw them. Headlights. In my rearview mirror, two bright beams pierced the darkness. A car, far behind, but moving fast. I hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour, but I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a trucker, or someone else pulling an all-nighter on the road. But something felt off. The car wasn't slowing down. In fact, it was gaining on me. My grip on the wheel tightened. The speed limit was 65, and I was already pushing 70. But this thing was flying. The glow of its headlights grew larger in my mirror, and within seconds, it was right behind me. Too close. Way too close. I tapped my brakes lightly, hoping to signal for them to back off. They didn't. Instead, they swerved sharply, veering into the other lane as if preparing to pass. But they didn't. They just hovered there, driving parallel to me, their high beams flooding my car with blinding white light. I turned my head to get a look at the driver, but there wasn't one. The driver's seat was empty. My breath caught in my throat. The car kept pace with me, smooth and steady, as if controlled by some unseen force. I forced myself to look straight ahead, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "This isn't happening," I muttered under my breath. "It's just exhaustion. Just my mind playing tricks." But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I pressed down on the accelerator, trying to put some distance between us. My speed climbed to 80, 85, 90. The road stretched endlessly before me, but the other car didn't fall back. Instead, it sped up. Then, without warning, it swerved into my lane. I barely had time to react. I yanked the wheel to the right, my tires screeching as my car veered onto the shoulder. Dust and gravel kicked up in thick clouds, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I was going to spin out. But somehow, I managed to steady the car and force it back onto the road. My heart was hammering against my ribs, my breath coming in short gasps. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the car was gone. I blinked, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror. Nothing. No taillights. No sign of movement. Just the endless stretch of highway behind me. I slowed down, my pulse still racing. Had I imagined it? Had the exhaustion finally gotten to me? But then, my radio cut out. The music stopped, replaced by a static-filled silence. And beneath that static, I heard something else. Breathing. Slow. Shallow. Right behind me. I didn't look. I couldn't look. Instead, I floored it. The engine roared as I pushed the speedometer past 100. My only goal to get away. From what, I didn't know. But I wasn't alone in the car anymore. And something told me. Whatever had been driving that car had found a new seat. I don't know how long I drove after that night. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel too tight. My eyes burned from exhaustion. And every shadow on the road felt like it was watching me. The motel, the driverless car. I kept telling myself it was just stress, just road fatigue. But deep down, I knew better. I needed to get off this highway. That's when I saw the sign. Exit 23. Rest, stop and gas. 2 miles. Relief washed over me. Finally a break. I could refuel, stretch my legs, maybe even grab a cup of coffee to clear my head. The headlights of my car illuminated the green highway sign as I approached the exit ramp, and without hesitation, I took the turn. The road curved downward into the darkness, and soon I was cruising along a smaller, quieter road. The trees here were taller, casting long shadows that swallowed the pavement, but ahead I spotted the gas station, a lone beacon of light in the empty night. Pulling in, I noticed how eerily silent it was. The place looked old, abandoned even, but the neon open sign buzzed faintly above the convenience store door. There were no other cars, no employees visible inside, just the dim, flickering glow of fluorescent lights. I stepped out of my car, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. A cold wind whispered through the trees, sending a shiver down my spine. Ignoring the unease creeping up my neck, I grabbed the gas nozzle and began refueling. That's when I saw it. The highway sign. Right in front of me, standing on the side of the gas station, was another green sign. Exit 23. Rest, stop and gas. 2 miles. My stomach dropped. That wasn't possible. I turned back toward the road. The exit I had taken was gone. Just an empty stretch of pavement leading straight ahead into the darkness. No ramp, no highway. I wasn't at a gas station. I was somewhere else. My heart pounded. I needed to leave. Now I shoved the gas nozzle back into the pump and sprinted toward my car. The moment I slid into the driver's seat, I locked the doors and turned the key. The engine didn't start. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. I twisted the key again. Nothing. The battery wasn't dead. The dashboard lights were still on. The radio crackled to life, but instead of music, there was only static. Then, through the static, I heard my own voice. Welcome to exit 23. You've been here before. A choked breath left my throat. That was me. My own voice, distorted and warped, playing back through the speakers. I slammed my foot on the gas, turning the key one last time. The engine roared to life. Without hesitation, I peeled out of the lot, tires screeching against the cracked asphalt. The moment I hit the road, my headlights illuminated another green highway sign ahead. Exit 23, rest, stop and gas, 2 miles. No. I had just left. My breath came in short gasps as I sped forward, determined to escape. I drove for what felt like hours, but no matter how far I went, the road just looped back, around to the same place. Every time, the gas station looked slightly different. First, the lights inside were flickering. Then one of the windows had a crack in it. The third time, I swore I saw a shadow moving inside. The fourth time, there was someone standing in front of the gas pumps. I slammed the brakes, my heart threatening to claw its way out of my chest. The figure was tall and motionless, its face hidden beneath the flickering lights. I could feel it staring at me, even though I couldn't see its eyes. Then it took a step forward. That was enough for me. I gritted my teeth and hit the accelerator, swerving around the figure and speeding toward the road ahead. The moment I crossed back onto the highway, my headlights flickered. And suddenly, the sign was gone. The gas station was gone, and the exit ramp was behind me. I didn't question it. I didn't look back. I just drove, the cold sweat still clinging to my skin. I don't know how I got out of that loop. I don't know who or what was waiting for me at that gas station.